Okay. So people are signing up, filling in kind of quickly. So I'm just going to give it a minute or so. The numbers are going 24, 25, 26, 30. People signing up. Welcome to people as they show up. Should I be seeing the library on the main screen?
Yes, you will see me and Lopez Library. Our images that, yeah, unfortunately, we can't stop our images.
Where did that image come from? Okay, all right.
That's mine.
Okay. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think I'll just begin. We are going to start really promptly because we have a full and wonderful program tonight, and we do need to end at 7:30. So we are going to trust that people on island time make their way to join us, and they always do. So welcome everyone to Protecting the Salish Sea in the Time of COVID-19. It's really wonderful to see these knowledgeable and generous panelists and friends. I want to thank you for sharing your expertise, and I hope you do really understand how honored we are to have you here with us. It's also nice to imagine our participants out there beyond the screen. There are right now 41 of us, 73 people signed up, so we'll see how that changes through the evening. My name is Kai Sandburn, and I'm speaking on behalf of Community Rights San Juan Islands. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the behind-the-scenes support. The Lopez Island Library, thank you for making this happen. Malia Sanford runs this program, so thank you, Malia. I also want to acknowledge Ann Whirlage Karp. She's with our group, and this is her brainchild. I think it was the way she addressed COVID anxiety, kind of witness to all the changes going on around us, and she felt she wanted to do something. So this was her vision. Thank you, Anne, for that vision, and thank you all for saying yes to that vision. Beth Robson is managing our tech, thank goodness, and Robin Reed will be moderating our questions. But before we get there, I think it's worth remembering what brings us here. And at this point, hopefully we're going to get some photos up. Anyway, so we are going to, sorry, I lost my notes, but we're going to take a moment just to relax and look at where we are here. I think that we all understand how lucky we are to live here. This is why we're here. This beautiful kaleidoscope of the Salish Sea. We know what's at risk, and we're committed to doing what we can to protect and defend this place. So thank you everyone for showing up. This is really a night where we hope to find ways to work together with the people in our panel and work together with our residents and all the people who love this place. At this time, we acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples who have fished these waters and lived on these lands for generations and continue to live in peaceful, respectful relationship with the Salish Sea. We recognize that the San Juan Islands are part of their ancestral homelands. At Community Rights San Juan Islands, we commit to respect and build relationships with the Coast Salish peoples and to join in the work of repairing the damage done by settler colonialism. So that photo can come down. Here's a little background about our group. We've been meeting for 2 to 3 years now, brought together by concerns about the multiple threats to our region, the heartbreaking decline of the southern resident orca, burgeoning numbers of fossil fuel projects, some of those stalled to credit should be given to some of our panelists here for their active roles in those things. The impacts of fish farms and the increasing militarization of our skies, the rapid rate of development in our region, and more. We've been delving into the rights of nature movement, appreciating it as a holistic approach to these many threats, and further exploring how we can craft a Rights of the Salish Sea initiative to address these and other concerns. The rights of nature movement, for those of you not familiar with it, is based on the simple assertion that nature and natural entities have the right to survive, thrive, and regenerate their vital life cycles. It's a global movement gaining momentum in the long-haul process of change. The heart of the movement arises from indigenous understandings and seeks to bring this into Western legal frameworks. Currently, our legal system treats nature as property, an inventory of resources to be extracted, to be bought and sold. Despite good intentions along the way, this is allowed, permit by permit, the death by 1,000 cuts that is bringing us and so many species, our waterways and our oceans, to the brink. The belief that humans are separate from and in control of nature endangers the very world that we're a part of, putting us all at risk. In addition, it robs many of us of a sense of belonging to the larger world, and there's great potential in realizing that belonging. We believe that the health and the well-being of the Salish Sea bioregion must be at the center of all discussions and decisions about projects with the potential to harm this ecosystem and all that depends on it. And we believe that recognition of the rights of the Salish Sea offers the unifying language and the legal frameworks to do this. In turning this over now to Robin and to our panelists, I want to express my gratitude for the many ways our panelists bring their gifts and their energies to stand up for our region, for us, and for the Salish Sea. And I look forward to the discussion that follows.
Thank you, Kai. And I want to welcome everyone to our discussion today. My name is Robin Reed, and I will guide you through introductions and a set of questions. I am a scientist and a teacher, and I spend most of my time on Lopez Island in the San Juan Islands. So first, we want to say that we are so grateful to all the panelists for taking time from their busy lives to join us tonight. We also thank the over 40 or 50 participants currently online for joining us. And more widely, we thank all of our relatives and appreciate them, both human and non-human, in the Salish Sea. So for the last year, a team of us at the Community Rights San Juan Islands have been doing research by interviewing residents of the San Juan Islands. We asked them what they value about the Salish Sea, what threats they see to the Salish Sea, and possible solutions to those threats. We interviewed people across islands from different walks of life and different political, religious, and other beliefs. In these interviews, we have been deeply moved by how much everyone we interviewed loves this community, loves our environment, and is concerned about different threats to the Salish Sea. And we also heard how much we all depend on the sea, often for our livelihoods, but certainly for our well-being. While we may propose to solve these threats in different ways, we are all unwavering in our love of these islands and the Salish Sea. And in COVID times, all the people we interviewed say that COVID has deepened their love of this place and their appreciation of how much our communities have provided each other mutual aid in these tough times. So why in the world did we organize this event? Well, these concerns expressed by community members and our COVID experience make us eager to address even more than before the threats to the Salish Sea. Our goal today is to hear from government representatives, nonprofit leaders, a scientist, an activist, a lawyer, about the threats to the sea and what we can do about it. We hope to hear how we can each help, even when we think these threats are large and overpowering. We'll emphasize some of the biggest threats that people told us about in our research. They talked about increased shipping, threats of an oil spill, climate change, and military exercises and noise. So we have 4 goals. First, we want to bring diverse people together to talk about these issues. Second, we want to identify the threats. Third, where are the solutions or possible approaches? And fourth, we want to leave you, we hope, with a positive vision of how we might move forward together. Okay, so now I'm going to do a tiny bit of housekeeping. How will the panel work? We will start with short introductions by each of the 6 panelists, and then we will pose some questions from our organization, Community Rights San Juan Islands. If we have time after these questions, we will then turn to the questions that participants submitted when they registered or posted or can post now in the Zoom Q&A. Because we may not have time to address all the participant questions, we ask the panelists if they would continue this conversation after the panel with the participants, and all of our panelists graciously agreed to do so. And just to those participants who are listening but not on the panel, you are muted to us, so we can't hear you while we're speaking. So please use the Q&A for comments and questions during the event. Okay, now I'm speaking to the 6 panelists. So I will first ask each of you to start with a 3 to 5 minute introduction to yourself and your work in the Salish Sea. I will call you each in turn, starting with Alex. I will raise my hand in the Zoom window when you have spoken for 5 minutes. And I might start going like this if you go over 5 minutes. Of course, if you finish in less time, we have time for more questions. We will then have a question session. You do not need, as a panelist, to answer every question. And then please, when you want to answer a question, please also raise your hand in the window so that we can see that you are ready to go, and I will call you in turn. And as I said previously, if there's time, we will take questions from the participants from the Q&A and registration. Okay. So let's get to it. So first, let me thank all the panelists for joining us again and the participants. You know, it's just everybody's busy, and we are just so grateful for all of you, regardless of your panel or participant, for all the work you do for our communities and for sharing your valuable time. We really admire and your work and honor it. For those listening, if you would like to know more about the panelists, Beth, who's one of our organizers, is posting short bios for each panelist in either the chat or the Q&A. I think the chat. Okay. And we would like each panelist, so now we're going to the panelists. We would like each panelist to introduce themselves and their work. And then when you're done with that, please answer this question. We're going to go to Alex first. So here's the question. What actions have you taken to protect the Salish Sea that you are most proud of? And as a reminder, I'm going to raise my hand when you reach 5 minutes. Okay, let's start with Alex, who is a Washington State representative from the 40th District. Alex, can you unmute yourself and tell us about you and how you have helped the Salish Sea?
Oh, thanks, Robin. And thank you, Kai and Beth and Anne and everyone else who's been involved in organizing this. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. My name is Alex Rammel. I am joining you tonight from Bellingham, which is traditional Lummi territory here on the shores of the Salish Sea. And I was appointed this last January to be state representative for the 40th District, which includes the San Juan Islands, sort of northwestern Skagit County and southwestern Whatcom County. And before that, I have worked in a variety of capacities as an environmental activist and organizer. As a state representative, it's a part-time job, and so I'm still working for Stand.Earth as a climate policy advisor. And so I thought I'd talk just a little bit about a few projects that we've worked on that relate to protecting the Salish Sea. For, I think, many people in our region, the work to stop the various coal export terminals was a unifying, organizing event or series of events. And that certainly was true for me. It called me to step up my environmental advocacy and efforts here, and became a focal point of my involvement in both politics and eventually sort of took over my career. As we worked on organizing to bring the community together around the idea of making sure that we had the most comprehensive environmental review that really identified all of the things that we were nervous that that project would do in our community. That organizing work led to politics work, and eventually led to me being hired by Stand.Earth to work not just on coal trains, but also a series of other fossil fuel transshipment and export projects that have been a concern in our region. And that includes the Tesoro refinery, now Marathon refinery expansion project that would have dramatically increased shipping of petrochemicals and precursor chemicals through the Salish Sea, including significant spill risk. That project, again, because we were pushing for the most thorough environmental review, ended up, one of the major issues was that the company didn't really want to disclose the nature of that spill risk and articulate it. And by pushing for a thorough review of those impacts, we were successful in stopping the elements of that project that had those impacts. Ultimately, the company came to the table and wanted to negotiate. Similarly, have been involved in trying to stop the Trans Mountain pipeline. Stand.Earth has an office in Vancouver, British Columbia, and folks there are my colleagues there have been organizing for years to make sure that the public's voice is heard in the environmental review process for that project, that the First Nations concerns and are heard and elevated there through the courts. And all of which has led to, I think, what is the answer to your question, sort of what am I most proud of, which is really, in our region, we've been facing many of these projects, the coal terminals, oil train projects, petrochemical projects, pipelines. And at this moment, we have this opportunity to say, through our local land use codes, let's stop playing this dumb game of whack-a-mole, this project, that project, and each time the community has to organize around it. And we have this opportunity to ask our local governments to use their land use power, their planning authority, to say, these are the kinds of projects we're willing to allow, but these are the kinds of projects that we're not willing to allow. So in 2016, the Whatcom County Council passed an emergency moratorium stopping new fossil fuel transshipment projects through the industrial area at Cherry Point. And since then, I've been working to advise, guide, push, cajole, help them to implement a set of policies that will prohibit future new fossil fuel transshipment facilities, limit new limit the existing refineries in the way that they can expand. And ultimately, that's going to make, I believe, a huge difference, not just in this community, but as that example is carried forward, will be one that we can see making a difference throughout our region. So that's work that I'm doing in my day job. I'm also excited as a state representative to start tackling some of the issues related to climate change. As a member of the state's 2021 Energy Strategy Task Force, we're looking at where our state's going to get our energy in the next 30 years. And I believe Washington State is on a pathway to be a leader around the nation. And so when we look at the things that are going to impact the Salish Sea in the future, I'm really concerned about ocean acidification, the impacts of drought on our salmon, et cetera. And everything we can do now to confront climate change will be instrumental over the next 30 years in protecting the Salish Sea. So looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Alex. You were slightly over time, but not much, so thank you for that. So the next person that I'm going to go to is Lovell Pratt, who is the Marine Protection and Policy Director at the Friends of the San Juans. Lovell?
Thank you, Robin, and thank you everyone for organizing this event and for my co-panelists. It's great to be here tonight and great that there's so much interest in this. So as Robin said, I'm the Marine Protection and Policy Director at Friends of the San Juans. And, and my work is based on our mission at Friends of the San Juans, which is to protect and restore the San Juan Islands and the Salish Sea for people and nature. So much of my work relates to vessel traffic and associated noise and presence impacts and the risks of accidents and oil spills. And also much of my work relates to the protection and recovery of southern resident killer whales. Back in 2001, Friends of the San Juans was a co-petitioner that led to the 2005 listing of the southern resident killer whales as an endangered species here in the US. And the protection and recovery of southern residents continues to be a priority for Friends of the San Juans. So I'm going to give some examples of my work that are currently have opportunities for public engagement. And I just want to say to those of you joining us tonight, it really makes a difference when the public engages in permit review processes and rulemakings and all the opportunities where the public has to speak up, you know, on behalf of the Salish Sea and all the wonderful, the southern residents and all the marine fauna and the whole ecosystem. So thank you for those who do, and I hope you'll take advantage of these comment opportunities. So one thing that's happening right now is the Department of Fish and Wildlife is undergoing a commercial whale watch licensing program rulemaking. There's currently an opportunity to comment on the draft environmental impact statement. And on October 21st, the draft rule will be released, and there'll be an opportunity to comment on that up until November 13th. And so this is a rulemaking that's specifically just to implement a licensing program for commercial whale watch operators. And you know, it has been a very contentious process, unfortunately. Friends of the San Juans has been advocating all along since the work of the Southern Resident Orca Task Force identified a recommendation to suspend commercial whale washing. We've been supporting that recommendation. And in this rulemaking process, the Department of Fish and Wildlife was required to look at the economic impacts to commercial whale watching, and the economic report determined that it would not be detrimental to, it would not impact these commercial whale watch operators if they were not able to watch southern residents. There's other whales, transient whales, humpback whales, there's lots of whales, there's lots of wildlife to view, and currently the commercial whale watch operators only watch southern residents about 10% of the time anyway. And the science panel, the rulemaking also has to consider the best available science, and a science panel was established to evaluate that. And they determined that you know, taking a precautionary approach was really important, and that every interaction of a boat with the southern residents should be considered an impact. So anyways, there is an opportunity to comment on the draft rule. I don't know what it is yet. We'll find out on the 21st, and we'll be doing some outreach about that. If people are interested, make sure you're on our contact list, our member list, and you can get more information about that then. So another area I'm working on is in regard to a proposal for a brand new container ship terminal, Roberts Bank Terminal 2, which is proposed to be built on top of the water in the Fraser River Delta, just less than a mile from the Washington state border. And my colleagues up in Canada are doing a great job educating the public up in British Columbia about this project and the impacts it would have, but very little is known about it with folks here in Washington state. So we're organizing to reach out to the governor and urge the governor to advocate on behalf of Washingtonians and the southern resident killer whales that this project would impact. and to oppose the project. And if they're not able to, if Canada's still determined to permit the project, to ask for some additional permit conditions. And I'll stop there, but I will provide a link to an action page that gives more information about this project as a follow-up to this program for people to get more information. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lovell. Really appreciate it. Deborah has joined us, and thank you for joining us. I'll turn to you in a moment, Deborah, let you get settled. How about we go to Dr. Joe Gatos of CDOC Society, Science Director.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on this panel tonight. I work for the CDOC Society as a scientist, and for the last 20 years, we've been funding and conducting science and working to ensure science is used to educate people and for improving decisions made about the Salish Sea. A lot of great work is being done to understand this place and to take care of this place. And speaking from some of the science that we funded or conducted and that others have done out there, our conservation actions right now are not really keeping pace with the insults that we're having. We're losing ground despite efforts to turn things around. And I just want to highlight a couple of issues that some of them people have brought up before. The first of those is a big issue of ocean acidification. I call it the ugly stepchild of climate change. It's not a hypothesis, it's not a theory, it's chemistry, it's like physics. It's related to us putting too much CO2 into the atmosphere and the ocean absorbing that and dropping the pH. And a paper just recently came out by Nina Bedarsnek and some other people. We are already seeing that under the right conditions, shell-secreting organisms like pteropods, Dungeness crab larvae are already experiencing negative biological impacts. Underwater noise has steadily increased over the last 3 decades. We talk about this a lot with southern resident killer whales, but it's probably also affecting diving birds, fishes, and even some marine invertebrates. And approximately 17% of the fish species, 1/3 of the, 17% of the fish, 1/3 of the birds, and almost 43% of the mammal species that use the Salish Sea are listed as threatened or endangered or are candidates. So the southern residents, while we talk about them a lot, just one of many species. And I would say in many cases, with the exception of the Coast Salish, we're not really doing a good job working across the border. Representative Rammel spoke about that earlier with some of the pipeline issues and issues with the coal terminal. We can do better working between the US and Canada and the tribes and First Nations. And then to top that off with all the issues we're facing, most of the people still do not even know the name of the Salish Sea. We conducted a study about 1.5 years ago. Only 5% of people in Washington State and only 14% of people in British Columbia actually recognize the name the Salish Sea. So it's the place where they live, it's a place that's having problems, but they're really not seeing that. And despite all of these serious challenges, we all live in the best place in the world. It's our home, it's so amazing, and there's so much to save. And I would just say that we're really lucky to have a lot of groups and agencies, tribes, First Nations that are working on this right now. And just, I want to put a plug out, find groups that are doing what you support and be a part of those groups and support them. And to get back to your question earlier, Robin, I just want to say, you asked about what we're most proud of that we've been working on. And mine, I would have to say, is probably not a science thing. They're science-based things. So my friend Audrey Benedict and I have written a couple books on the Salish Sea, one for adults and one for kids. And Bob Friel and the CDOC Society worked with us to put together a YouTube station called Salish Sea Wild. All of those are science-based, but the hope is that all of these things will get people to know and connect to this place, and then ultimately to protect it. So it's a use of science that we don't think of often, but it's something I'm pretty proud of, and I'm sure that others tonight, Curtis and other people, are going to be able to talk about that even more in depth, because it's not my area of expertise, but I think it's really, really important to connect. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Joe. Very impressive work. Thank you. Well, since you mentioned Curtis, how about we go to Curtis Dengler, who's a climate activist, works with the Mosquito Fleet. He's a musician, and he's a Lopesian, one of our own.
Y'all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, good. Yeah, Curtis here. I use he, his pronouns. Like Robin mentioned, I was born and raised on Lopez Island. Yeah, Lummi territory, depending on who you ask, say Saanich and Salish territory as well, historically. I've been kind of a lifelong community organizer, activist, and more recently in the last decade, working on issues of climate justice, especially when it comes to the relationship between the fossil fuel industry and fossil fuel expansion in the Salish Sea and the global climate crisis. And the bulk of that work, personally, has been with a group called the Mosquito Fleet. And the Mosquito Fleet is a grassroots network of climate activists fighting for a fossil-free Salish Sea. And we kind of focus on two main realms, I would say. One being grassroots movement building, right? So really trying to recognize the potential of people power, the power of everyday people to unite in enormous numbers and change the social political landscape, as well as the power of nonviolent direct action, the power of people to directly intervene in their world with their own collective power. That not being, a lot of people think of direct action and they think of somebody being arrested, and sometimes that is a part of it. But really more specifically, we use the term direct action to just emphasize again, the communities using their own power and asserting their own power in the interests of social and environmental justice. So to that end, in the Mosquito Fleet, our main focus, our primary campaign, as we put it, for the past almost 5 years now, has been the fight to stop the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, which Alex mentioned. And that's some work that I and we have done alongside actually many of the panelists, the other panelists here today. And I would say, I think certainly the Mosquito Fleet sees the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion as kind of, if you had to name the single largest threat embodied in a single project to the Salish Sea, it would be the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion. And for those who are not familiar with it, this is a proposed expansion of the existing Trans Mountain pipeline, which if completed would move around 900,000 barrels a day of tar sands crude from Alberta to the Salish Sea. That would result also in a 700% increase in vessel traffic, namely the movement of crude carrying oil tankers through the Salish Sea, through the San Juan Islands. So it's a major threat. Our friends and allies like those in the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, our friend Cedar George Parker usually says it's not a matter of if, but when there's a catastrophic spill. And so just to kind of highlight some of our work in this campaign, a lot of people think of, when they hear our name, they think of kayaktivists, people taking action on the water, doing crazy stuff like stopping oil tankers and getting arrested by the Coast Guard. But really our work is focused as much as anything else on doing our best to build and help build multinational, international coalitions against this pipeline. I say multinational because it includes indigenous communities from the Coast Salish communities like the Tsleil-Waututh Nation in BC and the Lummi Nation in Whatcom County, to even a broader set of folks up in the tar sands, as well as interior Salish nations like the Secwepemc Nation, which is the nation that the Tiny House Warriors are from. But anyway, our work, some of the highlights has included hosting an international action camp on Lopez Island years back that brought together folks from grassroots environmental organizations, social justice organizations, and indigenous communities on Lopez Island. And we trained in on-water direct action tactics together And some of the work that has kind of flowed out of that has included a campaign of actions in Seattle, where Kinder Morgan, the company that previously owned the Trans Mountain Project, has major facilities. And most recently, we kind of broke the story that Washington was receiving pipe shipments for the pipeline via the Columbia River. So we got out there and actually kind of intercepted and for a day stopped a large ship carrying the pipe directly. So I'll stop there. It looks like I'm at time, but really grateful to be a part of this panel and with all these other really awesome folks. Thanks.
Thank you, Curtis. Wow, really impressive work. So I think we're going to go Lindsay next, and then we'll end up with Deborah. So Lindsay Schroman-Warren is a city council member in Port Angeles, and he also works as an attorney for the organization Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. I hope I got that right.
You did. Hi, thank you. And it's really great to be part of this panel. I'm really inspired by what everyone shared already. And thank you to the other organizers. As we're looking over the names of participants, I see some familiar names there. So it's really good to see your name. And I hope everyone's doing well this evening. So yeah, I'm across the water from Lopez Island in Port Angeles in Clallam territory. And on January 1st of this year, we were out walking on Edis Hook, the sand spit that makes up Port Angeles Harbor. And we saw some orcas in the harbor. It was super exciting. And we were like, wow, it's going to be a great year. Or maybe today was the best day of the year and it's just going to get worse from here. Because I mean, this is the first time I'd seen orcas in the harbor. And I think probably the latter has been the case, but did see a flying squirrel on a backpack trip too. And so I don't know how to start here. There's so many things to do and so many things we have to do. I'm inspired by Donella Meadows' article, Leverage Points, Places to Intervene in a System. And she talks about working up and down these different leverage points, trying different things, trying to make a difference, recognizing that some things like making paradigm shifts or changing the goals of the system are really hard to do. But if you move that lever, you make huge changes. And other things we end up doing a lot of time doing, and are somewhat easier to do, changing the amount of a budget, for example. And yet those are pretty low down in the leverage points that we have. It's an inspiring article, but I think it's something that we all struggle with. How do we make effective change in a system that is really designed to push against the interests that we're all talking about here of protecting this place that we call home? So in the city of Port Angeles, one thing we've been doing is talking big picture about where our power comes from. City of Port Angeles is its own utility, and so we directly contract with Bonneville Power Administration for our power. So we've been working on some resolutions against the Snake River dams and the kind of financial and ecological loss that they contribute to. So when we're talking about salmon in the Pacific Northwest, in the Salish Sea, a lot of that is coming from the Columbia River system. And so we have to look bioregionally, not just across the border, but south and east as well. I really like the conversation about borders here, and it inspires me to reflect on this conference I was able to go to over a dozen years ago over in Jamestown, hosted by tribes and First Nations. They called it the Salish Sea Conference, and it was supposed to be on environmental issues, and it was, but the environmental issues that they focused on were the border and language preservation, right? So what does language preservation and the border have to do with environmental issues? We have to see those connections if we're going to solve these problems. So as in my role in the city, I also sit on the Strait Ecosystem Recovery Network board, which is like the North Olympic Peninsula version of something you have up in the San Juans as well. And a lot of what we're doing is we're talking about these budget constructs of the Puget Sound Partnership and these flow chart things, and it's wonky government talk. And we had somebody come and speak recently and said, none of what we're doing in this room is actually changing things. None of it is preserving and restoring the ecosystem that we're talking about. It's all hopefully leading toward that, but it's not actually doing it. So I think it's really good reflection on us to focus on, we're trying to protect the real world here. And that means actual changes in reality. That means, is there a shoreline getting impaired? Is there not? Are there going to be more greenhouse gas emissions from a new terminal? Are there not? Is there more vessel noise? The things that people are talking about here are actually changes in reality, and that's what's needed to protect Puget Sound. I'm sorry. See, I just did the wonky government, like protect Puget Sound, protect the Salish Sea, right? I said to them, we're not in Puget Sound. We're on the Strait of Juan de Fuca. It's the Salish Sea. But a lot of times we spend our time talking about budgets and policy and economics and really many things, human culture, the rules that govern what we do. And those determine how we interact with the real world. And yet they aren't actually the changes that we need to be seeing. So I look forward to talking about this more. I think I just got my time's up signal. So I will share the rest of what I want to share later.
You actually, I stopped you early. I had 4 fingers up, but that's okay. You will get another chance.
All right.
All right. So our last speaker, introducing yourself, Deborah, and talking about what you do, and tell us what you're most proud of that you've done to protect the Salish Sea. And I will give you 4 fingers when you're 4 minutes, and if you could stop when I have 5 fingers up. Thank you very much, Deborah.
That's great. And sorry, you guys, I'm in transit here on my way to pick up my amazing 16-year-old daughter, Emma. I really want to thank you all. I'm Representative Deborah Lakanoff out of the 40th LD. I get the pleasure of representing this wonderful place that we have called home with Representative Rammel. And I also have the honor of saying hello to Lindsay. It's been 15 years since we hosted the first Coast Salish gathering in Jamestown, and I coordinated that. And I do recall meeting you there, and it was one of the strongest and influential gatherings of people of color, the Coast Salish science, law, and policy. So I'm just ecstatic to know that, so many years later, the work that we did is still resonating with really great leaders such as Lindsay, but there's also an opportunity to continue to grow that. That partnership of the Coast Salish Gathering also stretches across to my friend Joe Gatos. It's great to see you, Joe. I did receive one of his books. They're fabulous. And Joe actually engaged with the Coast Salish Gathering with Dr. Jamie Donatuto and did a study on oil spill response and impacts throughout the Salish Sea if there were to be a spill. And he did it with Jamie and Larry Campbell out of Swinomish and Ray Harris. And they looked at not only the endangered species of the killer whale and the Chinook on both sides of the border, but also across where the oil spill would impact the habitat areas of where these resources fed and the birds of that area. So our wingspan is far and wide as far as relationships in our conversation tonight. I had the pleasure of knowing Alex way before we both decided to run for office in protecting the Salish Sea by getting rid of the 9 coal terminals that threaten this wonderful place that we call home. I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting Lovell and working with her on the coal terminals, vessel traffic, transboundary pipeline, Kinder Morgan pipeline, you name it, she's there, and I'm so blessed. And when I was running for office, Kai sat down and talked to me and reminded me, and she brought the heart into why I do what I do, is that the Salish Sea has a right. The Salish Sea and the resources have a right. And how do we intertwine that with the cultural teachings of the Coast Salish, and how do we understand that? And she's still working eloquently on that. And Curtis, you're all heart, my friend, to be and do what you're doing with courage and with the love of your community. It's quite an honor. So I'm going to pause there because I know we have a lot of work to do. You talked about what I'm so proud of, Robin. I'm so proud of to be able to say that I know all of these folks with me here tonight. I could look forward to learning from Curtis, and I'm so honored to be your representative out here protecting the Salish Sea. Oh, and by the way, it was the Coast Salish Gathering that lifted Bert Weber up on our backs and said, with Ray Harris and George Harris, let's do something different. Let's follow science and call these waters the Salish Sea. And the name was changed, and we're celebrating that for 12 years. So I'm just honored to be here tonight. I'm going to move over to where my daughter's house is. So if you see me take my video off, know that I'm all ears and listening.
All right. Wow, Deborah, I so appreciate how you pointed out your relationships to everyone here, and just really an example that I personally will follow and would like to emulate, and just so appreciate your work in the state legislature along with Alex. Okay, so we are going to move to a set of questions. There's 6 of them from Community Rights San Juan Islands. And so I'm gonna switch my screen and have a look at the questions so that I say them properly. So this first question is I think gonna maybe Lovell might want to get us started on the answer, but here is the question. So in your introductions, you talked about many threats to the Salish Sea. One aspect we would like to focus on is the special challenge caused by the international nature of some of these threats, which many of you recognize. For example, a fact sheet from the Friends of San Juan's shows that there were 12,000 shipping vessels traveling through the Salish Sea in 2018. These ships carry coal, oil and gas, potash, cars, and other goods. If all the proposed and permitted projects from that time were completed, there would be a 35% increase in commercial vessel traffic. And 90% of that increase is going to Canada, the Port of Vancouver, going right by the roundabout called the San Juan Islands and going to Vancouver, not to the US. So here's the question now, Lovell. And then others can join, and please raise your hands, as we're going along, and I will call you in turn. Lovell, so given this, how can we effectively protect the Salish Sea from international threats like this movement of shipping vessels through the Salish Sea?
Well, thanks, Robin, for that question. So we'll provide a link to the Salish Sea vessel traffic projections infographic, but I will say that this was from July of 2019, so it's outdated now. And one of the things that you'll see is there were 25 new or expanding projects identified on that infographic, and some of those are no longer moving forward. So Alex talked about the xylene project at the refinery that used to be Tesoro and is now Marathon. And the settlement agreement resulted in that project being canceled. And that was a result of engagement in the environmental review process and an appeal of the permit that was issued for that project. And I will say, in answer to your question about working in a transboundary Salish Sea ecosystem, I think we've had more success opposing projects in the US than we have in opposing projects in Canada. And so with the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 example, Friends of the San Juans has been engaged in the environmental review of that project since 2015. We even went up to Canada to testify before the review panel, but they didn't have an obligation to address the concerns that we raised because it was a project in Canada, and some of the concerns we raised related to resources and impacts here in Washington State. So I think that is one of the big challenges. Yeah, I'll let other people chime in, but I think that really it goes to show that it is important to engage in the environmental review of these projects and to speak up on behalf of the southern resident killer whales and all the other marine fauna in the Salish Sea who can't speak up for themselves.
All right, thank you, Lovell. Now, all right, Alex, please go ahead.
Thanks, Robin. And yeah, I think, Lovell, that's a good sort of acknowledgement of some of the challenge when we're dealing with the border, as Lindsay emphasized there, right? Like, because we don't have the privileges of citizenship with the government that's making those decisions, some of the things that we think about some of the tools that we try and use are just not available to us. But there are still a lot of tools that are available to us as activists and organizers. So one thing that Stand.Earth has been working on for the last few months is a campaign to try and get companies that are providing insurance to the government for different elements of the project to withdraw their support. To basically say we're not going to sell insurance that's necessary to move forward with the project because the PR around it is so bad. And that's something folks in the United States, folks in the San Juans, anyone can speak up and let those companies know. And I'm happy to help make sure that ends up in the follow-up materials as well. We're certainly able to help with financial support. One of the things that's been the most important in the fight to stop this project is the special consideration that is supposed to be given to First Nations in the Canadian system. It's unceded territory. It's still their land. And they deserve a day in court, but that's not free. And folks in the United States can help come together to support that work. When those legal fees have been due a couple of times, there's been a series of events in the San Juans and others. I know Curtis, Lovell, know both of you have been part of helping organize those as well. The Pull Together campaign to just raise money to help with those legal costs. And then the last thing I'd say is, Curtis, feel free to jump in and talk more if you want to about the civil disobedience aspect. But the public in British Columbia does not support the Trans Mountain Pipeline. There was a survey done 2 or 3 years ago that said that they found that 10% of people living in Vancouver were willing to go to jail to stop the project.
Wow.
10%, not opposed to it, 10% were willing to go to jail to stop it. When that construction starts, there's going to be a mass movement to stand in the way of it. And I wouldn't recommend anybody in the United States to go get arrested in Canada, but you can certainly go and cook meals. You can go and help out in all kinds of ways if you want to.
Thank you, Alex. I saw Curtis's hands up, and I think what we'll do is, Curtis, if you could round out this question, and then we'll move on to the next one. And sorry if I've cut anybody off.
Oh, sure thing. Thanks. Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Alex mentioned, I do think it's almost safe to say that our only real hope in stopping the Trans Mountain Pipeline is going to be a mass movement, which includes mass popular resistance and nonviolent direct action. Maybe we can think of something on scale of the George Floyd rebellion as an anti-racist analogy here in the United States. But when we're doing grassroots activism, we think about concrete targets and pressure points, right? Who are the institutions that make the decisions? What kind of political or financial stability do they rely on to make those decisions? And so the existence of the border has provided just a very real difficulty and obstacle to grassroots action south of the border, because obviously this project impacts not only the Salish Sea has no border, right? And these projects have no borders. These tankers know no borders, but they're real militarized obstacles to creating a borderless resistance. So it's a genuine challenge, but there's a lot of things that we can do in not only building kind of coordination and relationships with people across the border, but really supporting people. And there have been folks who have gone up north and participated in actions. Another thing very quick is that right now, there are grassroots organizations and indigenous-led organizations that are taking direct action against the construction of the pipeline. Important one to mention is the Tiny House Warriors from the Secwepemc Nation. And a very real thing that people can do is to donate to them. These folks are building solar-powered tiny homes directly in the path of the pipeline, simultaneously kind of embodying the future that they want to see, asserting directly their indigenous sovereignty over that land, and directly obstructing the process of constructing the pipeline. So encourage folks to look into that and just keep their eyes and ears out for ways to participate, because there will be actions in the future, even south of the border.
Thank you very much, Curtis. And thank you to Lovell and Alex as well. So we're going to go to the second question, which is a little different. So tribal and First Nations peoples have lived and worked in balance with the Salish Sea since time immemorial. And the question is, how can non-Indigenous people build relationships with and support the efforts of these nations to defend and protect the Salish Sea? Several of you have already talked about this a little bit, but please, let's see if anyone would like to start with this question. So anyone have a thought there?
You know, I have to go because I've got my daughter that I've got to pick up, but I want to stop in. But I thought this question kind of fits along my world that I work in. When we talked about how we can address the NEB hearings, the First Nations and the Washington tribes actually are able to engage in that conversation. Washington tribes based on the treaty rights. And I have to tell you, STAND and Friends of the San Juans, the work that Joe does, built on science, policy, and law, we're able to build a conversation and build a platform on how that impacts treaty rights, Aboriginal rights, and environmental justice. Those are the tools that we can find that recognize no border. It is the work of the Coast Salish people and the Makah Nation that intertwines within our state, federal, and international governments. I think for me, being able to really address and grow my relationship as the only Native American woman to serve in the state legislature, and the experience that I've had with tribal, First Nations, and provincial and federal governments is so important. As an elected official, you know, I acknowledge the activism that comes out, which is the very heart of the people that call Washington home. For me, I need to really look at the science, policy, and the laws of intertwining governing bodies together and recognizing and linking arms with the tribes down here in Washington state to collaborate. The sound science that Joe brings to the Salish Sea, there's nothing like it. The work of our organizations such as STAND and others and Friends of the San Juans, there's no other heart like that. Understanding what I can do to better engage and bring everyone to the table, including industry, to understand how we can better create a safer place for those who all call this place home, and who'll do it for generations to come. So right now, Department of Ecology is doing a spatial marine planning that's going to be done in 2021 that takes a look at the lifting capacity, because it's not just the tankers, my friends. It is recreational boats, it is military boats, it is a vast many of people who are on these waters that belong to the salmon, the Coast Salish, and into the killer whales. And how do we better find that continuity of working together? And that's what I hope to continue to do as a state legislator, is find pathways to work together with our tribal communities and then also to our friends to the north of us. So thank you, Robin, this is wonderful. If you host another night again, I'd be happy to come. Joe, if you have that report that you and Jamie did, I think it really is relevant to the conversations that are happening here.
Hey, thanks, Representative Lekanoff. I just put it into the chat so people can get it. It's open access, so have at it.
Look at how cool he is. Science loves Deborah and Deborah loves science. You're a rock star, Joe. Thanks so much.
Oh,
it's all yours, Representative Rammel.
Thank you, Deborah, so much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. So anyone else? Okay, Joe, go ahead.
Robin, not being a Coast Salish, I want to point out that the fact that you're bringing this question up is really, really important. And tonight, I just want to remind everybody that ecological destruction really disproportionately affects marginalized communities. We had a student this summer working remotely did a really nice blog post. I'll put a thing up on the chat for that. Her name was Sarah Doyle. But she said in that blog post that we talk a lot about salmon feeding southern residents. They feed 138 different species, and most importantly, people, right? And the Coast Salish depend on them. So the fact that salmon declines and contaminants in salmon have had on the Coast Salish, it really amounts to a human rights violation. And a lot of times we get poured mouth. People feel like restoring ecosystems is a social elitist action that benefits wealthy people that have boats and things like that. It really is not. It really is a moral imperative that betters all of us, and especially those that are marginalized racially, socially, economically. And the Coast Salish have been here since time immemorial. This is their place that we moved into. And we should see them as teammates. And it really pains me a lot of times when I see people that don't take the time to understand what tribal treaty rights are about, or feel that they're catching fish that we should be leaving out there for Southern residents. We're all on the same team here, and we really do need to work together. And so I just applaud this question to get people to start thinking about how can everybody see themselves as teammates and work together on that. And I'll leave it at that.
Nice, thank you, Joe. So Lindsay, I'm going to send the next question to you. So go ahead and make a comment on this one, but you're going to get the next one on rights of nature.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a story. When I was new on the city council, we went down to meet with Lower Elwha tribal council members at the tribal center, and one of them said, "Oh, it's so good to have the city council come down here. You usually don't," and because we've been figuring out how to govern communities in this place for thousands of years, and you've been doing it for about 100 years. So we figure you might be able to learn a thing or two. And so, I think that is part of how we need to work. I mean, part of the prompt was building relationships. And one of the things to say is just show up and keep showing up. And as somebody who's white, that's not always going to be comfortable, showing up in Native spaces and not knowing everything that's going on. But that's how a lot of the world is, and we need to continue to do that.
Lindsay, I hate to move on to the next question, but I will do so. So Lindsay, you'll know that this question is for you to start. So the concept of rights of the Salish Sea has the potential to recognize legal standing for the Salish Sea and allow us to support policies that will help protect the bioregion. So here's the question. How might recognition of these rights improve our ability to protect the Salish Sea? And go ahead and get us started, Lindsay.
Yeah, and I'll start with kind of talking about what rights of nature is, which requires first talking about what our legal system currently is. In our legal system today, a property owner has the right to destroy their property. This is something that as law students, we all learn, like first day of property class, there's this brainstorming exercise and the professor's asking, well, what does it mean to own property? And well, it means you get to exclude other people from using it. You get to use it yourself. You can transact it and give it to others or sell it to others. And at least for me, and I think this is a similar experience for others, we don't think of, well, you have the right to destroy it. You have the right to destroy your property. And that's true whether it's property that you own individually or whether it's property that we collectively own through the state. We treat waters often as collective property, but even if the earth is a common treasury for all, we can all collectively decide to raid the treasury, and that's basically what we've been doing. So that's the system we're in now. We treat ecosystems, the Salish Sea, smaller systems, a stream, a forest, we treat it all as property. And it becomes the subject of our rights, our property rights, rather than being something that has rights in itself. And for our purposes, we can just think of the right to exist. We're not talking about, does it have the same rights as human beings, human rights and all that. We're really talking about, like, does the earth have the right to exist? Do ecosystems have the right to exist? We could even take it down to below the ecosystem scale and say, do the southern resident orca whales have the right to exist? To some extent, things like the Endangered Species Act do hint toward that idea. But what we've done in our laws is we've waited until they're at risk of extinction before they start to get the right to exist. And why are we waiting? We know that we're slowing down, I think, the rate of destruction with our current legal system, but I don't think we're reversing that rate. And there's a big difference between, going over the cliff at 60 miles per hour versus going over the cliff at 10 miles per hour. But what if we don't want to go over the cliff? What if we want to turn around? And what if we want to restore this place? So our legal system is really good at remedying harms with monetary compensation. So Breonna Taylor's life can't be brought back by our legal system, but her family can be compensated with money. But they've said on the news, hey, that's not the same as having our daughter, right? So similarly with environmental harms, somebody harms your property, you can sue them for money, but it's very hard to use the legal system to stop things from happening. We've tried in the last 100 years to do that through injunctions and try and change the system to be something that can prevent harms before they occur, but that's not really how it was built. It was designed to transact money, usually between people who already had a lot of money. And so, that becomes a challenge for us because ultimately what we're doing is pushing against a system that is designed to take nature and turn it into money. And we're saying, wait, we want the real world to matter, potentially more because, as the saying goes, you can't eat money. You can't drink, how many days would people want to go without clean water? For how much? Would you go for 3 days without clean water for $1 million? Without any water at all? So those are some of the challenges we're dealing with. And so with the idea of rights of nature, a lot of communities and lawyers and organizers and other people have been thinking about, well, what if the earth and ecosystems themselves had rights? This affects both kind of a standing question of who gets to say something in court, whose opinion matters. And that's been something we've been dealing with, Justice Scalia's legacy in environmental standing for a really long time, and we don't necessarily need to go into that now. But I think it also has to do with the substantive question of, what can we do to an ecosystem before it has the right to say, no, you can't do that. And right now, it's not the ecosystem, it's the property owner who has that right. I think we've crossed this threshold over the last several years with decisions in other countries and then some actions in this country that have taken us beyond the question of, well, that's crazy, how could we think of our legal system that way, to now starting to actually ask the question of what could it mean to have a legal system that transforms in this way. And so that's an important stage for us to be in because I think this has a potential to be a positive paradigm shift in the law. I think there's also risks that the way that we theorize rights of nature and try to enact rights of nature could also serve as a form of colonialism. There's a proposal right now in Orange County, Florida, that recognizes rights to water to citizens of the county. And I find that really problematic. I hope I don't have to explain that, but I can if people want. And so the other question then is with rights of nature, what happens when we start to have it work and begin to protect places in the United States through it? It's already happening in other countries. There's, I think, a third stage that we'll eventually get to, which is takings. And corporate interests will say, well, fine, that's not my property anymore, but the government now owes me for that, right? And once again, we're back to turning nature into money. And will we be able to pay to keep all the fossil fuel in the ground? Will we be able to pay to prevent corporations that own a lot of these resources from extracting them? So ultimately, think there's a question within our constitutional framework around corporate takings and regulatory takings that rights of nature will bump into. A lot of folks want rights of nature to not be a fight. If we think of Frederick Douglass's famous words about wanting the ocean without its awful roar. But ultimately, our legal system is set up around property. And this is a concept that is very much opposed to the primacy of property in our legal system. So that's my quick summary of it. I can pause there because I just talked for a while.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does anyone have any other comment there? Or that was very, very helpful. So we have a couple. Oh, there goes Curtis. You want to say something? Go ahead.
Oh, I'll just be quick. I know I'm taking up a lot of space, but I can't help but kind of point out how I think one of the things that makes the idea of the rights of nature, the rights of the Salish Sea so provocative and inspiring is that it goes against, as Lindsay was alluding to, the very logic of colonialism, and I would say capitalism itself, the primacy of private property as some sort of universal value. And I think in doing so, it really gets directly at kind of the root causes of our ecological crisis and challenges us to think like, well, something so simple as recognizing sort of like the inherent right and ability of life to flourish of itself is such a challenge, and maybe we should rethink the entire paradigm that our society is built on. So I think it just has so much potential for broader change and broader conversations, even than just its local implications. So really applaud those working on it.
That was very, very nicely said. So what I'm going to do next is ask one more question of our last two, and then open to one question from participants, reminding the participants that all the panelists have agreed to continue the conversation after the fact. So the one question of two that I'm going to ask is Curtis' question, and he wanted to pose to the panel this question. How is protection of the Salish Sea connected to struggles for social and environmental justice? Anybody want to tackle that?
Is anyone fresh on the fish consumption rate issue? I think that is a great example.
Go for it.
I'm hoping somebody else is more fresh in explaining it.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that if you want to. I don't want to step on anybody's toes, Lindsay, but it was in that blog post that I just told you about a little bit earlier. And if you don't mind, maybe I'll just pull it up. Give me 1 second here to pull it up, and I can actually give you the rates. And maybe I'll just read from Sarah's blog post. So she said, Coast Salish consumption of salmon was previously much higher than it is today. Due to pollutants and dwindling salmon populations, consumption rates for Coast Salish has significantly diminished. According to Judge Bolt and the United States versus the state of Washington, salmon is a staple in Coast Salish diets. On average, communities consumed about 621.4 grams per person a day. Today, consumption has dwindled, but not by choice. According to the Lummi Nation Seafood Consumption Study, the Squamish tribe, for example, consume an average of 213.85 grams a day per person. So that's a third of what they were eating in the time of Judge Bolt. Currently, the state of Washington recommends people limit their Chinook salmon consumption to 2 or 3 servings a week. For a 160-pound person, that's 226 grams a meal, for a maximum of 678 grams a week, or 97 grams a day, which is 1/6 of what the Coast Salish were eating in the time of Judge Bolt. And so I think that the point is, contaminants aside, we're asking people to eat less salmon than they need to eat and have historically eaten because we've contaminated things. And then also they're eating less salmon because there's already less salmon available. And I think that those two issues come together as you were bringing up there, Curtis, to show that it really is a social justice issue with having decreased salmon and having increase in contaminants in salmon for groups like the Coast Salish. So.
Nice.
And the
Anyone?
law requires that the government should look at how much fish people eat and then set the contamination limits to that. But because of the amount that Native people eat in the Northwest, the government is unwilling to do that, right? Because of the impact on industry. So here's an example where we actually have a law that we're not willing to follow because of the severity of the law, even though it's very clear how much it harms Native people based on their traditional diets.
Right. And so what that means, Lindsay, is that if we were to recognize not just what they're eating now, but what they want to eat or would like to eat, if we have to clean it up to that level, that's a much higher level of cleanliness that we're required. But that's our moral obligation to do that for them, and the law is there. We talked earlier about what we can do to stand side by side with the Coast Salish and tribes and First Nations. We can point this out to our representatives, like Representative Rammel, and say, we want to address this at the state level. There's also federal issues with the EPA, but you'd know more about that, Representative Rammel, than I do as a scientist.
Thank you, Joe. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a fantastic example, and it is part of so many other. I mean, it's interrelated in so many ways, right? There's a very similar situation happening with ocean acidification and shellfish, and the one that's on our minds in the state legislature right now is the fish barrier removal, the culverts issue. So all over our state, we've got billions of dollars worth of work to do to remove these barriers that are preventing fish from going upstream. And so there's the question of the toxicity of the fish, but there's also, there's this question about the viability of their habitat or accessibility of their habitat. And those things are all interrelated with our treaty obligations. I mean, it is simultaneously a moral obligation, but a treaty obligation is in our Constitution as well. And sometimes we don't always meet our moral obligations as a society, but hopefully we can at least meet our constitutional requirements, and we're not doing that even.
Thank you. So maybe to sum up, if you don't each want to say one thing to, so everybody listening is also a citizen of a place, and many of them San Juan County, but other places. So what's the one thing that you just wish more citizens would do from your perspective that would really help protect the Salish Sea? Just one thing, keep it short. And yeah, who would like to jump on that one first? Anybody? I'm not seeing anybody. There it goes. Joe.
Okay, I'll say something and I'll keep it short. Be inspired and be aware. I think it all comes down to that. Know the place where you live, connect to it and protect it. And don't feel bad that you can't do everything, because I think we get overwhelmed sometimes in the time of a pandemic. There's a lot of issues going on that we're trying to address. Be proud of the things that you can do and try to do more when you can do it. So I just leave you with that as a positive note. Keep pushing forward.
You're quite the warrior for positivity, Joe. Thank you. All right, Lindsay, go ahead. Now hit your mute there.
All right. Thanks for that reminder. It is such a big interlocking problem, and I think a lot of this conversation has been at a pretty high level of policy and influence, which not all of us are involved with. I'm certainly hearing other folks in the panel talking about processes that I'm not familiar with, right? And I imagine that a lot of people listening are in a similar situation where, yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with that, but not familiar with that. don't get overwhelmed by it and have analysis paralysis, as we sometimes say in government. I mean, it's really important to just communicate these ideas and change the Overton window, if you want to be really wonky, but basically the way that people think about the issue. That, you know, so much of what we think this happens through administrative decisions and through legislative decisions and through acts of courts and litigation, but that is not possible unless people have changed the way that the policymakers, and I include judges as policymakers, think about the issue and decide that they should do the right thing. So, you know, the more, I mean, we always talk about like people read letters to the editors, just like write the letter to the editor and put out these ideas that we need to be sharing into the public discourse, so that we're not talking in an echo chamber, so that we begin to change the way that people think about these issues, which ultimately can change policy.
Nice.
It sounds ethereal and not concrete, but it does happen that way.
All right. I see Lovell waving over there.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Joe and Lindsay said and encourage people. I think a lot of us live right here in the islands, and we are so privileged to be in this beautiful place and to have the quality of life that we do because of the natural environment that we live in. And I think that sometimes it's challenging to speak up and to engage. But I just urge everyone to, you know, appreciate the quality of life you have and think about what opportunity you might have to speak up for the natural environment, for the many species who live in the Salish Sea who don't have a voice in, you know, permit review processes or environmental review processes or what have you, and take that step out of your comfort zone to speak up on their behalf.
All right. Thank you, Lovell. Curtis was a second before Alex. Go ahead, Curtis.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I would just say that if I had to tell people one thing to do, it's to get organized and raise hell. You know, I think I'm so grateful that we have people in positions of power like Alex and Deborah that genuinely care about the issues and do their best to advocate on behalf of the Salish Sea. But I'm sure, you know, Alex, you'd probably be the first to tell us that there's only so much that you can do absent vibrant and powerful mass movement. So, you know, it's like the biggest problem that I really see is just people's own sense of disempowerment, which ultimately I think is an illusion. You know, the powerful interests of the fossil fuel industry and, you know, their government cheerleaders that keep enabling them is really dependent on this idea that we don't understand the power that we actually have. So come together with your neighbors, come together with your community members, figure out those levers of power. And like I said, I'm sorry, go raise some hell. That's the only way anything's ever changed.
Thank you for that passion, Curtis. And Alex, how would you round us out?
Well, you know, I'm the politician, so I'm going to kind of dodge the question and give an evasive answer. Yeah, it's difficult to narrow down to one thing, right? Because, and I think the truth of it is that whatever you love doing, whatever inspires and motivates and excites you to get involved in is where you're going to be most effective, right? I was listening to a discussion about, you know, what's most effective for volunteers working on politics. Should you text bank or phone bank, or should you try and doorbell? Whatever you like doing, you're going to do better. You're going to do with energy and enthusiasm. And so I think it's important, like there isn't one answer to that question. But I do just want to observe that all of us talked about activities that we take that really fall into our role as citizens. And nobody on the panel, and I think rightly so, talked about things that we do in our role as consumers. And I think too often we get paralyzed and handicapped by this sort of story that's been told to us for a long time, that until your recycling sorting is immaculate and perfect, then you really can't talk about you know, how people should vote in elections on environmental issues. And if you're, you know, using a car that uses gasoline, then you really can't object to the refineries their pollution for our climate. So I reject that. I don't think our main way of making change in our society is in our role as consumers. I think the most important thing we can do in our society is in our role as citizens.
Nice.
So one thing, get involved in something that you love in your role as a citizen.
Nice. Wow. Nice rounding out. So Kai's going to conclude for us, but I wanted to get one question from one participant from the Q&A, and it's just a slightly different idea than this last question. This is from Ryan Palmatier, and he's asking, where do you see county and local government becoming a better partner? And so, that's obviously on our minds because we all have our local government, and of course Lindsay is in a local government, but but none of you here actually serve in a county, and so that's coming from somebody that's interested in the county. But anyone have a comment on that question? All right, Lovell, go for it.
So I'll just say that as much as, budgeting and discussions at the county level with elected decision makers may be disconnected from the environmental issues that we're talking about here, there still is a huge impact that local government's budgeting priorities reflect in terms of, what departments they fund and how they fund different programs and how those programs benefit the environment. So I think that how the county prioritizes where it puts its money is huge and is very significant in terms of how it impacts the environment locally. San Juan County is in the process of updating its comprehensive plan, and there's a lot of opportunity there. Even though that's a document that's mostly, goals and policies, it still helps set a framework for, future ordinances and resolutions that can really have a significant impact in terms of the local environment. So, and that's another place where citizens have an opportunity to engage in that update process. But ultimately, the decision will be the San Juan County Council, and so that's an important decision-making process for that governing body.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Lovell. And then we'll go to Alex, and then I'll ask Kai to conclude this session. All right, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I just build on what Lovell said. I think that counties in Washington State, cities and counties are required to do that Growth Management Act planning. And what they have done in the past has been a big improvement, but there can be a lot more that they could and should be doing. And I would really advocate that counties begin to plan for what is a fossil fuel-free future look like. And that's a little bit different story in the San Juans than it is here in where I am in Whatcom County or in other places. But I think that means that we need to be thinking about what's our transportation infrastructure, and it also means we need to be thinking about where people are going to live, and that's always been at the core of the Growth Management Act, but it hasn't really been implemented in the way that I would like to see it implemented. We have both a housing shortage and a problem with sprawl still along the shores of the Salish Sea in most places. And so, I think counties can and should be doing a better job, cities and counties can and should be doing a better job of that kind of plan.
Thank you, Alex. And I apologize to the rest of the panelists for not giving you more time or airtime, and also to the participants for not getting to all of your questions. But I want to thank all of you for joining us. This has been a very rich conversation. We've covered a ton of ground, maybe too much, but I learned a lot here. And so thank you so very much. And let me turn this over to Kai.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. It was kind of a wild romp through a lot of amazing territory. And so, and I would love to spend a day in a room with all of you and be able to have these conversations really go to the depths that respect what we're talking about. I just want to let people know that we will try to capture the links to any articles that have been referred to here. And we will also gather the questions that were not able to be answered in this format and direct those to the panelists if that's specific, but we will send those out and then send you all a follow-up email so that we can kind of make sure that everyone's been heard. I just want to acknowledge, there's the saying that it takes a diversity of tactics to bring about change. And I just feel like we have heard a really great range of tactics for a very common purpose and mutual passions, I think, for all of us. So I want to thank the panelists again, and thank the participants. There was at one point 69 people on the line. That's what I saw. And I don't really have anything more beyond that except an abiding sense of gratitude for all of you. So thank you. Okay, I guess that's for goodbye.
Thank you, Joe. Love and solidarity.
Yeah, love and solidarity.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
So, people leaving.
Hey guys, it's Malia. Just wondering if you want me to keep the meeting open for any reason or if you want me to end things.